I was driving back home from my cousin's place late at night. He lived about 2 hours away in a rural town, and I had stayed longer than I planned. The clock read 1:30 a.m., and the roads were completely deserted, just miles of open farmland on either side. The only light came from my headlights and the occasional reflective road signs, casting eerie shadows in the darkness. To keep myself awake, I blasted some music and focused on the road ahead. The dull hum of the engine, mixed with the faint sound of crickets through my slightly open window, was almost hypnotic. About 20 minutes into the drive, my headlights picked up something in the middle of the road. I slowed down, heart pounding. It was a bicycle. Not just any bicycle, it was standing perfectly upright, balanced in an unnatural way. The tires didn't even seem to be rolling in the wind. It was like someone had placed it there deliberately. Hesitated. I could have moved it, but something about it felt wrong. The bike looked old, rusted, its frame covered in dirt, and the seat was torn. There was no sign of a rider. Instead of stopping, I carefully steered into the opposite lane and drove around it, constantly checking my rearview mirror. The bike remained motionless. I tried to shake off the unease, telling myself it was probably abandoned, maybe by a kid who lived nearby. But something about how it stood so perfectly still, defying the wind, sent chills down my spine. 10 minutes later, I spotted something else up ahead. A rest stop. It was one of those older ones with a single vending machine, a couple of benches, and an old restroom building that looked like it hadn't been cleaned in years. What caught my attention, though, was an old truck parked at an angle across the entrance, partially blocking the road. The truck's lights were off, but I could see the silhouette of a man standing beside it. He wasn't waving for help, wasn't signaling, just standing there facing my car. I slowed down but didn't stop. My gut was telling me something wasn't right. As I passed, I turned my head slightly to get a better look at him. That's when I saw it, another figure, crouched behind the truck, barely visible in the shadows. Someone was hiding there. I hit the gas, speeding past the rest stop without looking back. My hands were shaking, but I kept driving. My heart pounded in. My chest and my breathing was uneven. What the hell was that? Who were those people? Were they trying to block the road? About a mile down, I forced myself to calm down. Maybe it was just some weird coincidence. Maybe the man was just waiting for someone, and the crouched figure was fixing something. But deep down, I knew better. Then my phone buzzed. I glanced at it. No number. Just the word, unknown caller. I hesitated, but answered. Hello? No response, just breathing. Heavy, deliberate breathing. I hung up immediately, my stomach twisting in knots. I turned off my phone and focused on the road. I wasn't going to let paranoia get to me. Then up ahead, I saw headlights in my rearview mirror. A car was behind me. I hadn't noticed it before. Maybe it had been parked at the rest stop. I kept an eye on it. The car maintained its distance at first, but after a few minutes it sped up. The headlights grew brighter. My grip on the wheel tightened. Was I being followed? I switched lanes. The car did too. I accelerated. So did they. Panic surged through. I was in the middle of nowhere. No gas stations, no houses in sight. My only option was to outrun them. I slammed my foot on the gas, my car roaring forward. The other car did the same. The distance between us closed fast. Then suddenly my headlights illuminated something in the distance. Another roadblock. 2 more cars were parked diagonally. Across the road, forming a makeshift barricade. 4 or 5 figures stood beside them, barely visible in the dim light. My mind raced. This wasn't random. This was planned. The bicycle, the truck, the rest stop, the phone call. They had been leading me here. I had seconds to react. There was no way to stop in time without hitting them. The only option was to veer off the road. Gripping the wheel, I jerked it hard to the right. My tires screeched as I tore through a gap in the trees lining the road. My car jolted violently as I hit uneven ground, bouncing over roots and rocks. The sound of cracking branches and crunching leaves filled my ears. I didn't stop. I kept pushing forward, maneuvering through the dark woods, heart pounding. I could hear engines revving behind me, the beams of headlights cutting through the trees. They were looking for me. Then, silence. I killed my headlights, holding my breath, My car sat still, hidden in the dense brush. Minutes passed, maybe longer, then faint voices. They were close, too close. I gripped my steering wheel, my pulse hammering. Then one voice stood out, a whisper, right outside. My car. He's here. I didn't think. I turned the ignition, slammed my foot on the gas and tore through the trees, not caring if I hit anything. Branches scraped against the sides of my car as I plowed forward. I heard shouting behind me, but I didn't stop. Finally, the trees thinned out, and I found myself back on the main road. I swerved onto the pavement, nearly losing control, and floored it. The moment I was back on the highway, I saw no one behind me, no cars, no lights. I didn't stop driving until I reached my town. I pulled into a gas station, parked under the bright lights, and sat there, hands shaking. Finally, I turned my phone back on, dozens of missed calls, all from unknown caller, and one message. It was a single photo of my car parked in the woods. I never drove that road again, and I never stayed late at my cousin's place ever again. I was 19, working the night shift as a delivery driver for a small fast food place. It wasn't a bad gig, good tips, quiet roads, and an excuse to drive around town. But that night was different. It was around 10 p.m. when I got an order for a single meal. The address was a house in a quiet neighborhood I hadn't been to before. No big deal. I picked up the food and started driving. A few minutes into the trip, I noticed a car behind me. Nothing strange at first, but after a few more turns I realized they were matching every move I made. Same turns, same speed. They never passed me. By the time I reached the neighborhood, my nerves were on edge. The car followed me all the way in but didn't pull into a driveway, just kept creeping down the street after I parked. I walked up to the house and knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Still nothing. Then from behind me, I heard the sound of tires skidding. I turned around and saw the car that had been following me. It had stopped right behind my parked car, blocking me in. My stomach dropped. The doors opened and 3 people stepped out. Hoodies, gloves, faces partially covered. One of them reached into his pocket as he started walking toward me. I didn't wait to see what he had. I sprinted toward the backyard, hopping a fence without thinking. Behind me, I heard them shouting. I ran through the neighbor's yard, jumped another fence, and kept going until I reached a main road. When I finally called the police, they arrived to find my car still there. But the other car and the 3 people were long gone. The house I had delivered to, vacant. The order had been a trap. I quit that job a week later. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them again. Their silhouettes emerging from the car, the way they moved toward me with purpose. I kept asking myself, what if I had hesitated a second longer? What if I hadn't noticed them following me? The police told me they'd patrol the area, but they didn't seem too hopeful. Probably just a random attempted mugging, the officer had said. These things happen. You got lucky. I didn't feel lucky. I felt hunted. The next day, I drove by the neighborhood again, this time in daylight. The house where I had attempted the delivery was a wreck. Overgrown grass, a mailbox overflowing with old letters, and a for sale sign leaning crookedly in the yard. There was no way anyone had lived there for months. I looked around, trying to shake the uneasy feeling in my gut. The street was quiet, but something felt off. That's when I noticed it. A car, parked a few houses down. Not the same one from last night, but something about it made me uneasy. It was too clean, too still. The windows were tinted dark, and I could swear I saw movement inside. I didn't stick around. I drove straight to work and told my manager what had happened. He was shocked but mostly concerned about the safety of his other drivers. You should take some time off, he suggested. Or maybe think about quitting. It's not worth your life, man, I agreed. But before I left, I decided to check the order history on our system. I needed to know where that call had come from. The order had been placed online. The contact number was fake, and the name used was simply John. But the most chilling part? The IP address it had been placed from was traced back to an open Wi-Fi network located in an abandoned strip mall on the other side of town. Felt sick. Whoever had set that trap hadn't done it randomly. They had planned it. I spent the next few days in a state of paranoia. Every time I left my apartment, I felt like I was being watched. I kept my curtains closed, double-checked my locks, and jumped at every unexpected sound. Then, on my 4th night off, something happened that made my blood run cold. I was taking out the trash when I noticed a small folded piece of paper wedged into my front door. My heart pounded as I picked it up and unfolded it. Inside, in shaky, handwritten letters, were the words, "Why did you run?" My breath caught in my throat. I spun around, scanning the parking lot, the bushes, the darkened windows of nearby apartments. Nothing. I rushed inside, locking the door behind me. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial 911. When the police arrived, they did a quick sweep but found no one. They took the note as evidence, but, again, didn't seem too concerned. "Could be a prank," one of the officers suggested. "Maybe a jealous ex, a friend messing with you." But I knew better. This wasn't random. This wasn't a joke. They had found me. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the building made my heart race. I thought about leaving town, but where would I go? I had no family nearby, no savings to fall back on. Then at around 3 a.m., I heard it. A car, driving slowly past my apartment. I peeked out from behind my curtains. It was the same car I had seen parked near the vacant house days before. It moved at a crawl, headlights off, as if searching for something. Or someone. I backed away from the window, heart hammering. That was the moment I made my decision. By noon the next day, I had packed up everything I could fit into my car. I quit my job over the phone, left a note for my landlord, and hit the road. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay. I never looked back. It's been 5 years since that night. I moved across the country, changed my number, and never used my real name on delivery apps again. But sometimes late at night, when I'm driving alone on an empty road, I still get that feeling. Like I'm being followed. Like someone is still watching. And every now and then, I dream about that piece of paper. Why did you run? I don't know if they ever found someone else. I don't know if they ever tried again, but I do know one thing. I was never supposed to get away.